Hello, welcome to episode 5 of the Tom and John Show. We're looking forward to our guest today, Cale Bigelow from Purdue University, going to bring us perspectives about the Midwest and how things went this summer, and maybe just as importantly, how to prepare for the coming winter. Who knows what that's going to be, but nobody knew what it was going to be last year either. And so I think it's one of those issues where you err on the side of caution and be prepared. My co-host is John Kaminsky. John?
Yeah.
Take it, man.
Yeah, so this is episode 5. It's been nice having some good guests on, and Cale, you're still muted, so make sure you unmute when you're about to talk, but you should be able to do it. Yep, I think that's got it. We've been talking a lot about different topics with Curtis and Matt Schaefer and some others, and now we have another academic in to kind of shut us around. Tom, you had just mentioned before we went live about the weather, and I think you said it's 78 degrees out in State College on October 28th. It doesn't make any sense.
I snuck 9 holes in this morning wearing shorts. So, beat your hearts out, Florida.
Good for you. I think they said that by the football game this weekend in State College, it's going to be in the 30s during tailgating and potential flurries. So yeah. We're about to get smacked. So, Cale, that's a good transition to you. What's going on out in your area?
We're, and I don't know what it's like for you because you'll probably get it in about 36 hours or less. But we were in those mid-70s yesterday, and it's 58 right now, so it's changing pretty quickly. Probably one of our biggest challenges in the last 6 weeks has been the amount of rain that we've had. It's been really wet here, which has made it really difficult for a number of our folks to actually get things done in terms of, particularly any sort of quarrying or anything where they've had to operate some equipment on pieces of property has been really challenging. I've had a few people that have talked to me about that. We had this front that's just come through, and a number of leaves have dropped, and I talked to a few lawn care folks just the other day because typically in our region people are doing a broadleaf herbicide application right now to try and clean some things up, and that's been a little bit of a challenge trying to get to some properties that suddenly are covered with leaves, and we oftentimes overlook some of those things. We do calendar-based things, and don't sometimes pay attention to what's actually at the site. And there's a lot of companies that will go ahead and still spray, and then the next spring the consumer's not real happy with some of those kinds of things. But last just before this past storm came through, some people were finally able to try and shoehorn some things in, like their quarrying at tees and fairways, and finally get on top of some of those things. But it's been a long summer in terms of if people had any sort of injury, trying to get things to recover. And they finally got some things there about September, and they're real interested to see what's going to happen going into the winter.
So what were the problems this year for you guys in the Midwest?
We had, with our state, a lot like Pennsylvania. You guys sort of west to east, us north to south. If you had cool season grasses, particularly the bent grasses and the Kentucky bluegrasses, not any major issues there. If you were trying to flirt with some of the warm season grasses, and again, we continue to see the Bermuda grasses move up and into Indianapolis for some applications, and anybody that had zoysia grass this year, things were just extremely slow. Spring dead spot wasn't as big of a topic as it has been in some years for the Bermuda grasses, primarily because a lot of the Bermuda grass, there wasn't a whole lot there, so you couldn't talk about spring dead spot if the grass wasn't greening up. But on zoysia grass, there were a number of people talking about the large patch issues.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Tom, maybe it's a question for you. I saw that Dan Mearsman spoke to my class from Philly Cricket Club a few weeks last week, I think, and he was saying that his zoysia grass now on the 9 holes that they established is just starting to go dormant, and with days like this, where I don't know what it's like in Philadelphia, but probably in the high 70s too. You think there's any potential problems with these things going dormant so late, or do you think that's good for it, or what?
Well, I'm in sympathy with those people that are trying to figure out what kind of move to make or whether or not to make a move. You know, we have Philadelphia cricket with Zoysia, and we have um, Bermuda grass over in Marion, and we got all kinds of things. As you know, Cale, out in southern Indiana, everybody's trying to move these things further north, and that's great when you have a really challenging hot summer. Then along comes winter, and now you get I don't, you know, I've been around this place for quite a few years, and this is not atypical to have a record-breaking day. The record high is 78. My temperature gauge right now is sitting right on 78. What does that do after we've had a couple of hard frosts as recently as 2 days ago? Physiologically, these warm season grasses just shut down. They don't like it, and then they get turned back on again by a warm day, and then we're going to have, as John said, snow flurries over the weekend, turn them back off again. I think the fail-safe in there for warm season grasses is they're quite responsive to long days. And these short days, even though it gets warm, and the radiant heat load and the light intensity is all waning, I think they have a way to compensate, and that's my hope for the guys that are trying to make them work. But it's time will tell. It's like anything else. These things just have to play their own game.
Right. So, Cale, what are you telling the different contingencies you have, warm season and cool season guys? What's kind of your mechanism for preparation going into the winter?
You know, it's like anything. Be careful. You know, traffic can be one of your worst. I mean, traffic can be just as bad as a harsh winter, particularly, you know, with some of these wet conditions and people are getting out there and putting a little bit too much activity in terms of equipment, you know, and injuring that plant going into things. I like Tom, what you said, it's the last 5 days I've seen a tremendous difference in terms of how green things were, you know, last Thursday and where they are today. I at lunchtime ran out to our field center and checked on a couple things, and they're definitely going to bed in a big way. We haven't had that hard frost that apparently you guys have had yet, but they're definitely on their way out. You know, we can kick around the whole fall fertility thing, Tom, and you know, you've got a little bit of history in that with some of the warm season grasses, and I'm not, you know, completely opposed to that. But you know, fertilizing right now doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
No, it doesn't. I think you really have to let those warm season grasses take their natural transition toward winter coming, and all the environmental factors, as I said before, with shorter days. And I mean, we were down 30 degrees 2 nights ago. It warmed up quickly, but still, that the crowns of those plants are saying, you know, school's out. Let's just go to bed here. So there's no point in trying to, you know, feed it with fertility, particularly anything that would try to make it keep growing and stay green. That's not a way to help it survive, in my view.
Okay, what about the cool season guys? You know, especially those ones that dealt with winter kill last year. I know a lot of the POA groups were in big trouble. In our area, in kind of the Michigan area, and I assume in the northern parts of your area as well. Any suggestions to them, or is anybody trying anything new or different, or what are their thoughts?
I've talked to you know, 1 or 2 people about, you know, they're all healed back now. You know, they had there were some people that had some very serious issues, particularly if they had you know, 80-90% annual bluegrass, and you know, March, April, May was not good for them. They you know, listened to their guts, and you know, we like to think maybe they listen to some of us as well in terms of, you know, some spoon feeding programs and just trying to gently push their grass along. There were some people that, feel like they had some success in terms of interseeding, some bent grass in there. But I've talked to some folks that if they can get out there, they want to do a little bit more sand on top this year, trying to protect that crown a little bit more. But we'll see if they can get out there, quite frankly.
Well, what about, is anybody doing anything extreme, like guys now going to cover or anything like that?
Our state is a different economy than the Mid-Atlantic and the Northeast, and I don't know if they have covers in their budget, to be honest. And I think there's some people that have kicked around the idea of covers, but more than anything, they've had a chance to take down a couple trees. But I don't think they want to deal with covers, not until they maybe get 2 years in a row, and then they can convince somebody to actually purchase some covers.
Yeah, there's nothing like a disaster to pool resources. But I go back to the days when I was taking care of a golf course in northern Iowa, and we did some pretty interesting things just with top dressing, and they're not really burying a green, but getting the crowns protected to the point where people would say, how much is too much, how much is not enough. And it was always my contention that if there were leaves, green leaves still poking up through the top of whatever level of top dressing you were using, winter precip isn't always snow. It rains. It does other kinds of things, and it works that mineral material down around the crown and protects it, even against the winds that we used to get. And you went through all those iterations of people putting up snow fences and trying to get snow drift over the top and basically buffer temperature extremes by insulating with snow. And then they got in trouble when the snow started to melt, because then it would freeze and they'd have ice damage. So I think there's a lot to be said. If you look through the literature about top dressing, I have not been able to find very many studies that show that there's a better solution than an appropriate amount of top dressing going into winter for winter protection.
Yeah, and I think it's hard for us as academics to quantify it for them, because it is a little bit of an art, like you were saying.
It is.
We can talk about, quarter of a cubic foot or half a cubic foot or 1 cubic foot, but we don't know how much their turf is actually growing at the time. And the other thing that I've encountered in some of our research plots, where we've tried to get real aggressive with some of the plant growth regulators going into this later part of the season, trying to suppress anti-bluegrass, and you get too much top dressing on those, and that becomes a bit of an issue too. So
right.
It's really a feel thing for them, but I'm a big fan. Thumbs up for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be good if we could predict when problems were going to occur and put trials out on these golf courses. I guarantee if I went out and put a top dressing study out on a golf course with the expectation of winter kill, I could do it for 100 years and would never have it again. It seems to be the way it works with the research.
Just like doing snowball research.
Yeah, we just moved our sites. We've got 2 sites now in Pennsylvania, kind of the lake effect area, so we're trying to get some better sites, but total nightmare. Last year was like terrible year from a winter standpoint, and anybody that tried to get snow mold, unless you were in Wisconsin or Maine, you couldn't get any. So it seems to be the way things work. So, Cale, you do a lot of work with cultivars and variety trials and stuff. How much have you seen that changing the game and people's perception in terms of what they want to, maybe convert to, or what cultivars they want to select?
I think there's a lot of interest. It seems like every year, in the last 3 years, I'll get a good solid handful of people that genuinely have something fairly major on the books within the next 2 years, 2 to 3 years. And one of the concerns has been, we've trialed a few things that there's just not there's not seed in the fields. Some of these better ones yet. That market has certainly suffered with the economy, but there are some really neat ones that are in the pipeline, and some things that are on the marketplace right now. You hear about the V8s, you hear about the the pure distinctions and the T1s and the alphas, and there's a whole bunch of other ones. Seed Research has one that's I think they're just about to announce the name on it, that is extremely dollar spot tolerant. I forget exactly what it is. Leah had sent me an email about, that name is supposed to be approved here very, very, very soon. But this is a generation past their 007 and their SR 1150, which they've been putting in a number of blends. But there's some really good genetics out there. But by the same token, some of the stuff I've had some blends in our last trial. The A1 A4 blend is still pretty good. We have very, very poor success with A4 by itself, but A1 still is a decent grass as well on putting green turf. And Declaration's in there. A lot of people like the Declaration, but the biggest thing is we have to get these things into some places where people can actually manage them and start to get a sense for where some of those thresholds are as far as the fertility aspect and the top dressing part of it.
What seems to be a standout for you in your trials in the Midwest? I know around here, Dr. Lansku, V8 is looking pretty good in our trials. That one looks pretty good, and a few others.
It's looked really good. This experimental that will be coming from Seed Research is really, really good. There's one, I believe it's called Luminary, is another one that's done well here. There's about 5 different ones that are really good. And then right behind that, is the 007, is the Declaration, is the Pure Distinction, and there's some good stuff. A lot better than Annual Bluegrass in terms of reliability, if you ask me.
Yeah, I think if you had any of those this winter and you had winter kill, then you were in good shape. There was none at your course. But I think a lot of it depends on who's doing the recommendations, because they're all so good and there's not that much of a difference between them. Sometimes it comes down to feel or who wants to be the guinea pig. But I know when I was up in the Detroit area, Trey Rogers, and I'm not sure if Kevin was too, but I know Trey is really high on the Pure Distinction in their area, and some people have used it with pretty good success. There was one golf course that did a small amount of V8 on it, but it seems like once people jump on that bandwagon of one of those varieties, they stick to it. And so in that area, Pure Distinction seems to really be taking off.
It's interesting because I think Valhalla had redone their greens about 3 years ago in preparation for the PGA Championship, and they did T1 on their greens. And as far as the cultivars that we had, you had Pure Distinction on one end, it was very, very light green, and then you had T1 all the way on the other end. It was fairly dark. And so I guess the reason I bring this up is people have talked a little bit about, well, what about blends? And I think it's really important to be somewhat careful in terms of some of those blends. Most of them are probably compatible in terms of color, but there are a few that are these outliers.
That's a very good point, because you get the two ends of the color spectrum, and all of a sudden people think it's POA in there because it's really light green.
And maybe somebody wants that on an older golf course. They want that look.
That may well be, yeah.
So
let me backtrack to a comment you made about A4, and you said something about A4 by itself has not been very good. What's the
biggest, when we stress it and we stretch those intervals on the fungicide programs, I mean it really gets quite hit by some diseases, particularly dollar spot here. A1 seems to be in my research trials more resistant to dollar spot than the A4 is.
Yeah, I think that's pretty commonly seen, and I expect that's most of the reason the blend of A1 A4 came about, just to try to mask some of the dollar spot issues that A4 might have. But over the years, you look at trials in many locations from Spain to northern Canada. A4 and A1 head-to-head, A4 was always holding up and looking better under various conditions and stresses, but not disease. And so combining A1 and A4 may just be the right move. Uh, and I think a lot of people that have done that would agree.
Yeah.
The question, we don't mean to cut you off, Dr. Kaminsky, but I'm going to. One of the things that we oftentimes get questions about is, how are these grasses going to perform in collar situations? And I don't know. There's a couple people who played around with some things, but that's a question we get quite a bit of interest about. But I don't have any strong answers on the recuperative capacity in those high traffic collar situations.
Yeah, I think that what I was going to say, and this goes back to kind of Trey's response in terms of the pure distinction in that area. I feel like a lot of the people have the perception that the A1, A4 is a really high intensity management, a lot of thatch, and just a totally different beast, and it's been out for 20-something years now. And that maybe some of these others look like they were still fine textured and good quality, but maybe a little bit less intensive management. And I think time's going to tell. I don't think they've been out long enough to really know that, but it seems like that's why they were pushing that recommendation. So, Cal, I know you got to get to class and teach. Any final thoughts for people going out in terms of, hot topics, maybe some areas of your research, or any recommendations you have to anybody to hang on for the winter?
One of the things that's been the two things that have been of interest to me would be lower maintenance fairway species. Are there some things that we can do for some folks that are in that mid to lower end budget type situation, particularly lower water use types of things. And then we continue to get a number of different types of interest in the natural organic programs. Can you do organic fairways? And folks like the folks at Cornell have done some of this in recent years, and we keep chasing that one as well. But I don't have a strong answer in that area yet. But those are some directions that I'd like to head the next couple of years. And as I encounter people on the conference season, talk to them a little bit about some of the grasses that they've been able to grow, in their fairways that aren't necessarily bent grass. And I enjoy listening to some of those stories because sometimes some people have planted some stuff that seems to do pretty well for them. NTEP gave us a fine leaf fescue trial this year, and we're going to maintain that one at 3/4 of an inch. So, the folks in Minnesota have been doing a fair bit of research with that, and we're going to take it down where it gets a little bit more heat and humidity, and you just see how some of these fine fescues are going.
I think that's a good idea because the fine fescues and even some of the older colonial bents that are rhizomatous, as mixed together, work out pretty darn good. And the Achilles heel of all that is to resist the temptation to fertilize them.
That and overwatering them.
Yeah, you just gotta leave them alone. Just let them grow.
It's still managing expectations. If somebody wants, the bent grass look with these fine fescues, you just can't do it. And that's the hard part, is communicating that.
Yeah, it doesn't look as good, but it plays as good.
Yeah, we have, we established our fine fescue putting green last fall, and we've been maintaining it at about 0.2, so around 5 millimeters all summer long, and we had that stimping at about 9.5 at one point during the summer. It's still pretty young, but the top dressing, we top dress the heck out of it, and that canopy and the texture is so fine because of those leaf blades. It just looks like you see sand everywhere, and that's really what you see a lot in the UK too when you go over there. But we're going to keep playing with it. We fertilized it to get it to grow, to initially grow in, but now we're just backed off and we don't put anything on it. I'm anticipating maybe a half a pound a year if we're on schedule, maybe a little more if it's getting weak, but I think it's pretty good. So I'll be interested to see what you find out in terms of your a little bit higher cut but still pretty low.
Well, we got to get them through the winter here, and then we'll see. Hopefully, we'll get a decent spring growth out of them, and just go from there.
Yeah. And then the compost thing, is that something that you're going to pick up? I was at a meeting at Foxwoods last week, and one of the superintendents came up and told me he's been on this compost program, and they have they're making their compost tea on site. And he's like, well, we've reduced, you hear all these claims, we've reduced these fungicides, we've reduced this. in this case, I actually believe him. He wasn't just like, we're going to try it once or twice and see what happens, but he just committed to it. I think a lot of times these studies we put out, and we do it for 2 years, and we don't let things kind of adapt. We just let it.
Yeah.
We say, oh, they don't work, they stink, and they don't work, and then we poo-poo them. But somebody that maybe's on it 4 or 5 years, maybe you can see things balance out.
Yeah. So again, I'm throwing a couple things in the ground and starting to maybe see if we can chase some money to attach some people to it to try and actually study it. So we'll see what happens. Eric Watkins is doing some great work up at Minnesota, looking at microbial populations in the soil with different grass species, and this idea that the grass species is selecting different places to live based on the microbes that are actually in the soil, and that's what creates some success. So we've got some tools now, I think, that you can get a better sense for what's happening there in the soil, and trying to tease out, instead of just this bulk sample of what we call microbes, we can start to narrow it down a little bit more. But it's an exciting frontier of science in my mind.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. That's exciting stuff.
Sounds like a good project.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, Tom, John, thank you for having me on. Dr. Kaminsky, I'll see you as we sharpen our saw and get our science on next week. And
oh my God, I still have to put 2 posters together. I forgot.
Well, Cale, thanks for reminding him, and thank you a bunch and a half for joining us today.
Happy to do it.
And go back to work, my friend.
Okay. We'll talk to you later. Bye now.
All right. Thanks, Cale. All right, Tom, we'll wrap up the show here. I think another good episode. I think Cale brings some good information. I'd like to have him back on when we, maybe after a couple of years, to get some research spitting out from some of these trials that he's doing to kind of see where they fall. But I think
there's a whole community of turf researchers that are keenly going after what I believe is to be the future of. Sustainability is a catch-all, but I think it's important. And not only that, the whole philosophy of golf and its decline, if you will, I don't think you can deny that's a fact. Got to make the game fun again. If that means we plant sustainable grasses that don't take so many inputs and shorten golf courses so it's more fun. I like Jack Nicklaus. He says play it forward, and that's what I do.
All right, good.
Thanks everybody for joining us.
All right, yep, thanks, and we'll be back on here shortly with a new guest. I have somebody in mind, so I'll talk to you about him off the air. But
all right,
until next time, thanks.